You know, living in the countryside is, for many people, the perfect lifestyle. Now, although I was born and bred a townie, I've been lucky enough to live in this beautiful part of the country now for some years. I just love it. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. Now, that doesn't mean to say I'm an expert on country matters. Far from it. Although I remember when I was a Boy Scout, I was 14 years old, I won a nature badge. But I'm ashamed to say, I've forgotten almost everything. Look at this. Need a poop scoop. Now, during the next 6 weeks, I'll be taking a journey from the highest point in the West Country, finishing eventually, if all goes to plan, down at the sea with our buckets and spades. I hope you'll come with me. On this journey of ours, we'll be walking through some stunning landscape and meeting up with all kinds of different people. The experts, the people with the knowledge and the passion of the countryside, far greater than mine. So, where do we start? Well, this is Cleeve Hill, and this is the highest point in the Cotswolds. One of the explanations why this area is called the Cotswolds is because in the 12th century there was a man called Cotswold who owned all the land around here. So Cotswold, Cotswold. Sounds reasonable to me. At the time of the Domesday Book, there were only 100 people living in this area, and they were all in the local village of Bishop's Cleeve. Now, as you would expect, you've got some magnificent views from up here. On a clear day, you could see the Bristol Channel, which is over there, and it would be easy to follow the route of the mighty River Severn, which is over there. That's on a clear day, which we haven't got today. On a clear day, rise and look around you. The escarpment that Cleeve Hill sits on starts as far south as Dorset and goes as far as the North Sea in the other direction. All this was formed in prehistoric times, of course, as Colin confirms.
The rocks we're standing on are 180 million years old.
God, it's older than me.
Slightly. And they weren't actually formed in this location. At one point, the rocks we're standing on were about 500 miles south of where we are now, and were actually underwater. They were actually formed in shallow tropical seas around about where the Mediterranean is now.
I'm amazed.
And this landform we see is a result of glaciation, of water actually eroding away the landscape, the limestone rocks, which are very soft. This valley here is called Dry Bottom. It was actually formed by a river, a stream, actually eroded away this valley shape, but there's no water in the bottom of the valley anymore. The river has actually disappeared underground, and that's fairly typical of the Cotswolds. There's lots of these dry valleys.
Tell me about the soil. Is this good soil?
It's good soil for the plants that grow here, but it's actually very poor in nutrients, so you wouldn't want to grow any plants or vegetables in it for your garden. And this is a protected site. This habitat is protected. And the reason it's so important is that the low nutrient conditions mean that lots of different species can grow here. There's not one plant which is dominating, as it would be if the nutrients were much higher. So within a square metre of grassland here, we could probably find 50 different species of plants, different grasses. Later on in the season we'll have orchids and a whole range of specialised plants which you only find on limestone soils. And here we have 1,000 acres of it, so it's a very important site. And I mentioned earlier that these rocks were actually formed below the sea. And we can tell that because they're actually full of fossils of marine creatures. And if we go across to the quarry just on the other side, where the rock's actually been excavated, we can actually find the fossils which were living in these Jurassic seas 180 million years ago.
Come Come on then, let's go to the quarry.
Let's go have a look.
Now, why has it been dug out and who digs it out?
This is a project which the Wildlife Trust undertook a few years ago. You can see what happens is that the quarry just fills in with natural scree. It's falling down along the slopes. It actually covers up the interesting geological features, these rock strata. So every now and again we actually pull away the scree so you can see the rock formation. It's such an important geological site. People come from all over the country to see this because it's the only place you can see these amazing features. Back in geological time there was an earthquake, and the reason we know that is that these layers of rocks which we can see across here, they don't match up.
I can't tell the difference.
So if you want evidence that these rocks were actually formed underwater, here it is.
Hey, hang on. Look, there's one there, what's that? Can you explain those?
And these are fossil remains over 180 million years old of sea creatures which were living in the tropical seas when these rocks were formed. And you can see here, throughout this rock, there's old bivalves similar to cockles.
What about the holes? Is that where they fall?
These are where actual fossils are falling out. Still the impressions there. You can see the shells very clearly.
Yes.
Mussels. I think there's an
mussels.
There's an ammonite
and
here.
Cockles.
Yes. Alive. Often you can find fossils in the scree around. It's very good. We send people here fossil hunting all the time.
Hey.
There's a bit of a one that's like a present-day cockle, but it's 180 million years old.
Gee, that's fantastic. Well, and you say I can find these fossils anywhere in the Cotswolds?
Not anywhere in the Cotswolds. If you look at the rock strata around us, you can see there's different levels, and some of them have more fossils in than others, so you have to be in the right place. But yes, you'll find fossils if you look carefully.
All right, well, Colin, it's been a lesson and a half. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
Good.
Well, I do know a couple of old fossils. You know, I work with them.
Thanks for that.
That's another story. No, it really is so stunning round here. It's just beautiful countryside. Let's breathe in the air, breathe in the landscape. What was Colin saying about fossils? Because this looks like an area that I might just find one. Pick up the odd sea urchin, or hang on, let's have a look. Now what's this? Is that an ammonite or a sea urchin? Or... They're very dirty, very dirty. Right, let's go and wash them off. One of the fascinating things about these is that to think that that is millions of years old. Now then, let's see what we got here. No, that's no, that's nothing. That's just that's a rock. I reckon that's a rock, and so is that. But this, yes. You know, I think that's one. That's amazing. That is a fossil. Not a sea urchin or an ammonite, but it's definitely a fossil. And I could be probably the first person ever to touch this after millions of years. I mean, that's really exciting. Yeah, I must ring Colin. Be very proud of me. The Cotswolds are famous all over the world and always seem to conjure up images of chocolate box villages and picturesque landscape, which of course is true. But the unique thing about the Cotswolds is this lovely warm stone that seems to appear in practically every building that you can think of. Then there are the walls. Miles and miles of dry stone walls all over the West Country. Now, some of these walls have been around for 200 years, and the reason for that is because there's no cement. The wall is able to move as the ground moves and settles beneath it. Now that's clever, isn't it? The ironic thing about this is that round about 1850, all the walls that were needed were more or less completed. So the wallers had very little to do. So in effect, they'd built themselves out of a job. And I don't know whether there was a labour exchange in 1850 or if they were allowed to sign on. For their sakes, I hope so. When the walls eventually started to crumble in the 1900s, all the men with the skills to repair them, well, they were all dead. But today, we have men like Jerry Ball, who's been a waller now for 30 years and worked mainly around here. And he's very much alive, I'm happy to say. Let's go meet him.
See, that's a beauty there. It goes around the corner a bit. Easy around the corner. Yeah. Another there. That's a beauty. First one I built was in Marsfield. I think it was on Dr. East's bungalow.
Yeah.
About 33
Who's
years
Dr.
ago.
Rees?
The local doctor.
Oh, Dr. Rees,
Yeah,
yeah.
local doctor, yeah. I try to always keep it in rows myself.
Yeah, but you don't use cement or anything.
No, none at all.
So how do they
Just
stay together?
Fill in the middle all the time and keep propping the stones up. I always slightly lean them outwards
Yeah.
and then just fill the middle, because when you don't fill the middle, it collapses like that.
You make it sound so easy. Could you teach me how to build a?
Definite.
How long would it take?
A week.
Only a week?
You'll be earning your wage in a
I
week.
tell you. Can I ask you how much then? Come on, by the hour?
No, metre.
You get paid by the metre?
Yeah, I get paid £50 a metre.
Good grief. I'm in the wrong job.
This is what fascinates me, why they should, they go about a foot and then they go out 2 or 3 foot, then they come back in again.
Well, why?
I can't understand that unless they had a...
Well, how many years ago was this?
Unless the neighbours had a row and they say, well, you better get over a couple of foot.
How many years ago was this wall built, for instance, would you say?
200 years.
200 years?
At least.
We're sitting on a 200-year wall.
Yeah.
Do you really believe that the craft and the skill of this building and the dry stone walling is going to die out? Are you saying
probably?
Yeah, because no youngsters are coming in and.
Well, you imagine here if you was here in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
You just got to take the rough with the smooth.
Will you come to my house and renovate my dry stone wall?
I will. If you pay me enough.
Well, I'm not going to. £50 a metre. Tell you. Well, it's been great, Jerry, and thanks very much. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I've learnt a lot.
Yeah. Well done.
The walls are great places to see other things as well. It's a labyrinth of nooks and crannies, ideal for plants and small mammals like voles, who love the security of the place. That is, unless you have a weasel or a stoat after you. Their supple bodies are perfect for hunting in such a place.
I've never seen so many stone walls in my life. As I say, miles and miles of them. Yeah. Even I can tell the difference between a weasel and a stoat. A weasel is weaselly recognised because a stoat is totally different. The old ones are the best.
Mind you, this area is quite devoid of people. It's perfect. I think I'll keep this our little secret.
To think that this whole area used to be covered in woodland, which grew up after the Ice Age. I mean, the beauty of this landscape is the sheer scale of it. It's overwhelming and certainly very inspiring, so if you want to compose some music or write some poetry or just be on your own, well, this is a place to come to. I know that if anyone ever mentions Exmoor to me in the future, this is what I'll think of. Now over there where those trees are, there used to be a farmhouse complete with barn and outbuildings, And this was owned by a man called John Knight. Now, John Knight was a very big landowner in the 19th century, and he was what you would call today a farmer ahead of his time, because he was responsible for clearing heather over a vast area of Exmoor, about 10,000 acres to be precise. Anyway, that beech clump acted as a windbreak, and the house stood there for about 200 years before, during World War II, the army took it over and used it as a target practice. Well, that's true. I hope they evacuated it first.
On days like these, with the mist rolling in, Exmoor can seem like a lonely place, but I love it. As long as you're dressed right and have a good map, there shouldn't be a problem. But there's more to Exmoor than meets the eye.
And it's all deep peat up on this ridge, which is why we get the blanket bog forming up here. And this again is another of these special European habitats that we have here on Exmoor.
I'm sinking here, you know. I'm sinking.
I know, that's the
got
problem
that
with
sinking.
the stuff. Yeah. Well, it's all this wet, you see, that forms these bogs.
So I could, any minute now, I could just sink.
Yes, well, you've got to watch out. It's where you get this bog moss that you want to avoid. If you've got a bit of heather and stuff, the heather will be on the harder ground.
Well,
it's like stuff like that. It's not, yeah.
Look
I'd
at
keep
that.
out of there.
Well, certainly will. Oh, yeah.
You see this now, this is, just be careful, because this is where it really is going to be pretty soggy.
Okay,
Look.
hang on.
Right, let's get a bit of this. This is bog moss, sphagnum moss, and it's amazingly absorbent stuff. Look at that. Look at all that water that's just in that little tiny bit of moss. Look at it, it's still coming out, see?
Brilliant.
And this is the stuff that they've used for field dressings. The Laps used to use it for putting inside nappies.
No.
Again, it's the absorbency. But what it's doing
You
here...
can buy it in a shop and stick it in a napkin.
I think they went and gathered it. But underneath this, there's a great peat, great layer of peat, probably 2 meters of peat underneath here, and it's been formed by progressive layers of this sphagnum moss, and it's very acid up here, so it doesn't break down, and so it just gradually rots and forms peat. It's a bit early in the year, but you can just see that's bog cotton. It's just beginning to come into flower, and a bit later on it'll fluff out like little cotton wool, fluffy little bits of cotton wool all over this area.
We'll have to come back, won't we?
Well, I'd love to see you again.
If you ever come up here and say, Kathy, you know, as they did in Wuthering Heights, and that's miles away.
not my scene, I'm afraid. No, no.
Wonderful, isn't it?
Further down the valley, the landscape changes completely.
Let's go into Horner Wood.
Horner Wood, down in the forest where the green grass grows. Or green grass.
Yeah, it's very old wood. 100 years ago, this was a hive of activity. It was an industrial landscape. They were chopping down trees, making tan bark, which they used for tanning leather, down in Porlock, down the valley. The wood that was left, they would turn into charcoal, which then was taken across to South Wales for the steel making process.
The rivers that run through these valleys are pretty fast, but are ideal places to see a grey wagtail, or a dipper, who particularly likes the turbulent pools and shallow ledges to feed in. You can see why it's called a dipper. The grey wagtail is a pretty little bird, but it's always on the move. I get tired just watching it.
Look at all the wooden flowers, isn't it beautiful?
Oh, lots of them.
Yep,
What's that
celandines.
yellow flower?
Celandine, that is.
That's a celandine,
Yep.
that's right.
We cross the stream, yeah. Yeah, this is a really good example of one of these old trees, covered in
that's
mosses,
amazing,
as you can see.
What's this?
Well, that's wood sorrel, pretty little thing. There's a lovely little clump of it up there, look, growing on the tree.
And how many different mosses are there then?
Oh, I couldn't tell you, I'm afraid, but there are a lot.
Well, David, look at this tree. I mean, this is a fantastic tree, but isn't it? It looks dead. Is it dead?
Yeah, it is dead, but it's the tree itself is dead, but it's absolutely hotching with wildlife. There's beetles living in here, other sorts of invertebrates. It's just the sort of place where bats roost.
Where?
I mean,
up
there? In holes in the tree, and you've got these great.
In other words, and there are ferns up there.
and again, a lot of the woodland birds nest in holes. These old dead trees are absolutely invaluable for that.
So although this is a dead tree, I mean, it's still alive for.
Absolutely, it's these old trees, which is one of the really important things about this wood. One of the reasons why it's so special.
And how long now will this tree last? Do you think?
Well, it'll gradually fall apart.
Looks
It'll probably go on for another 100 years. See you and I out well and truly.
Looks like one of the Muppets.
It's lovely, isn't it? Great old character.
So quiet. You know, this is so beautiful. This is Tarr Steps. And I'm told this is probably one of the oldest medieval clapper bridges in England. Now, the reason it's called a clapper bridge is because, as you can see, all the stones are clapped together. Now, legend has it that this bridge was built by the devil, and he still owns the sunbathing rights on the stones. And long ago he said that if anybody crosses my bridge, I will kill them. And he was true to his word, until one day the locals got fed up with all this and sent in the local parson. And the parson sent his cat across the bridge, and the cat disappeared to a puff of smoke. And so the parson had to come onto the bridge himself and face the devil. And the devil cursed him and shouted at him and swore at him. But the parson stood firm. And the devil then realised that he'd met his match. And so after that, all the locals were allowed to cross the bridge, but only when it was too hot or too cold for them to sunbathe. And I'm told that today, the devil still owns the rights, the sunbathing rights on these stones. So I think I'll keep my shirt on, or I might disappear into a puff of smoke. Cheers.